Ah! The world was full of pain. The world was also upside down, and something was streaming down Sunny's face. He could feel the familiar taste of blood on his tongue, but also of something else, unbearably bitter and oily, which made him want to retch. A sharp scent was assaulting his nostrils, seemingly seeping into his very brain. Opening his eyes, he beheld the world in utter confusion. The crack on the windshield of his PTV seemed to have disappeared. No, the windshield itself was gone, turned into a scattering of glass shards. The PTV was laying on its roof, with water flowing inside through the shattered windows. The interior of the mangled vehicle was bent and misshapen. The wheel was broken, the dashboard was gone, and he could see a mess of sparking wires behind the displaced plastic panels. The liquid flowing down his face was blood mixed with gasoline. Hanging upside down, held in place by his seat belt, Sunny groaned. The fuel, that damn fuel. Who in their right mind fueled their PTVs with flammable fuel? Now, he was one spark away from turning into a blackened, crispy corpse. Turning his head a little, Sunny saw the other Mordred hanging from his seat, unconscious. The rearview mirror was gone, though, so he could not tell what happened to Effie and Saint. I am so fed up with this crap. Gritting his teeth, Sunny tried to disengage his seatbelt. When that did not work, he growled in frustration and pulled a tactical knife from a hidden sheath on his belt, the very same knife he had almost been killed with last night. A few seconds later, Sunny fell down onto the roof of the overturned PTV and let out a stifled scream. Sick of it. I'm sick of it. Crawling through empty space where the windshield had been, Sunny felt the cold rain washing the blood off his face. He was a damn sovereign. He was a supreme titan, a being much closer to being divine than to being human. He was not supposed to bleed, his hands were not supposed to be cut by the shards of glass, and his ribs were not supposed to crack from something as pedestrian as being hit by a speeding vehicle. Sunny was indignant. Sunny was angry. He was completely over this nonsense. The amount and the intensity of pain he felt would have sent an ordinary person into shock and paralyzed them, but Sunny simply ignored it. After all, this mundane suffering could not compare to the dreadful agony he had endured countless times before. Letting out an infuriating hiss, he pushed himself off the wet asphalt and slowly stood up. Sunny swayed, staggered, but remained upright, looking around with a murderous glint in his bloodshot eyes. The vehicle that had crashed into his PTV was a dozen or so meters away, deformed and leaking some sort of fluid. Its doors were open, and men in black clothes and masks were already getting out. Another vehicle had just skidded to a halt to his right, and even more masked men were pouring outside, into the rain. 1, 2. Sunny's vision was blurry, so he couldn't even count them. Enough to vent my anger, anyway. Behind him, the bent door of the overturned PTV suddenly flew off from a powerful kick, ricocheting off the asphalt a few times before coming to a stop. Effie climbed out awkwardly, then rose to her feet by using the mangled frame of the vehicle as support. She was bruised and battered, too, but seemingly in a better shape than Sunny. He was hit the hardest because the enemy PTV had crashed into the driver's door. Giving Sunny a dazed look, Effie smiled crookedly. Her lips and teeth were painted red by blood, so that smile looked a bit frightening. You alive? Sunny let go of the car and spent a few seconds remembering how to maintain balance. Technically, I'm dead, but yeah. Effie stared at him for a moment, then looked away and rolled her eyes. Another one. Gods, why am I always surrounded by zombies? She straightened and faced the approaching enemies with a sober expression. Morgan should be here in a few minutes, I think. Sunny raised a hand to wipe the blood from his eyes. He did not feel too well, at the moment. Do you think we can survive a few minutes? Effie smiled wryly. Of course. I don't know about you, but I'm not dying on an empty stomach. I refuse to. Her bloody smile widened a little. The masked men were about to reach them. There were 7 of them, each armed with knives or batons. Sunny and Effie, meanwhile, were both in sorry states, bleeding and barely standing upright. It hardly mattered, though. Hey, Castellan. If you're watching. Sunny took a shaky step forward, then pretended to stumble. The nearest of the assailants used the opportunity to strike while the enemy was off balance. Lunging forward, the man raised his baton and struck down, aiming to crack Sunny's skull. Instead of swaying and desperately trying to regain his balance, though, Sunny suddenly pivoted on one leg, dodged the baton, then grabbed the assailant's wrist and plunged his knife into his arm. He pushed the blade upward, slicing it open from wrist to elbow, then pushed the man away and kicked him in the abdomen. The masked man flew back, colliding against his companions and momentarily blocking their approach. "Let me show you what the people from the real world are like. You poor fool." To his left, Effie used the enviable length of her shapely, runway-worthy legs to push-kick one of the assailants in the chest before his knife could get anywhere near her. Things like weight and reach were much more important in fights between mundane people, where soul essence did not serve as the great equalizer, so her height gave her an advantage. Even without essence, Effie's strength seemed almost monstrous. Her blow was powerful enough to send the man flying back and crashing heavily into the asphalt, as if he had been kicked by a horse. He rolled over his shoulder, folded awkwardly, and remained laying there in a groaning heap. Sunny smiled wickedly. "You should have never messed with us, bastard." But then, his expression fell. Wait. 7. Why were there 7 assailants? Each of the 2 adversary vehicles had all its doors open, 4 per PTV. Which meant that. There were supposed to be 8 of them. Cursing, he spun around and saw a dark shape leaning to thrust a blade through the window on the passenger side of the overturned PTV. Where Mordred was entangled in a seatbelt, still unconscious. Crap. Sunny threw his battered body forward, knowing full well that he would never be able to circle the car in time. But then, there was a loud crack, and the falling torrents of rain were illuminated for a split second by a bright flash. The back of the 8th assailant's head evaporated into a bloody mist. Time seemed to slow down. Saint's disheveled form revealed itself from behind the mangled PTV. Her hair was a wet mess, and there were oily stains on her coat, but other than that, she seemed mostly fine. As the assailant's body fell to the ground, Saint looked down, at the smoking revolver in her hand. There was a distant expression on her beautiful face. But only for a moment. Wha? Then, Saint's expression settled into a mask of aloof indifference, and she moved her hand in Sunny's direction. Bang! 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 It only took her a couple of seconds to discharge the 5 remaining bullets, hitting the 5 remaining assailants with eerie precision. Each hit was a flawless headshot. Sunny flinched belatedly. The bodies fell onto the wet asphalt. In the wake of the deafening gunshots, the world was filled with a ringing silence. The rustling of rain drowned out all other sounds and obscured the surrounding buildings, making the whole scene seem a little surreal. 6 of the 8 assailants were dead. One was trying to crawl away weakly, bleeding heavily and not long for this world. The 8th seemed to have lost consciousness. Sunny blinked a few times, then exhaled slowly. He was startled, relieved, and a little disappointed. The battle had only just started, and now, it was suddenly over. As a result, his boiling emotions had nowhere to escape, churning and simmering inside his soul. He took a deep breath, swallowed them, and then exhaled again, trying to purge them. In life, there were worse things to feel disappointed about. Well, that has been quite unexpected. Now that the danger seemed to have passed, he allowed the pain to wash over him, swayed, and let out a quiet groan. I'll be damned. Effie's voice was full of stunned disbelief. She looked at Sunny and raised her eyebrows, at a loss for words. He stared back at her for a while, then shrugged while raising both hands. Yes, that had happened. Turning away from Effie, Sunny circled the car and approached Saint, who was still standing there with a revolver in her hand, no expression written on her face. Sunny studied her for a few moments, then raised a hand and gently pushed the revolver down. It was only then that she stirred and looked at him, her face still frozen. Detective Sunless. Saint's voice sounded a bit hollow. I am out of bullets. He offered her a reassuring smile. That's all right. You don't need more bullets. She looked around, studying the scene of carnage she had perpetrated, and then nodded thoughtfully. After a few seconds of silence, Saint spoke again, sounding uncharacteristically unsure of herself. Detective, I feel strange. Sunny sighed. What a mess. Saint had yet to remember herself, so she still considered herself to be a law-abiding citizen who was far removed from strife and violence of any kind, let alone cold-blooded killing, like any normal person was. More than that, she was a doctor, someone whose life's work it was to help people, not kill them. But at a decisive moment, her true instincts, the instincts of Onyx Saint, the taciturn shadow born on the streets of the dark city, must have taken over. Naturally, she was in shock, she was probably horrified, failing to process her thoughts and emotions. Or, maybe not. Perhaps there was a different reason why Saint was feeling strange. Sunny. Hearing Effie's yell, Sunny turned around and frowned. It took him a few seconds to realize that there was something deeply wrong with what he was seeing. What the? The 6 corpses seemed to be melting. They were turning into wisps of ghostly white mist, and that mist was stretching its tendrils towards Saint. She looked at the mist with a dazed expression. Suddenly panicked, Sunny moved to shield her with his body, but the ghostly mist simply passed through him, as if meeting no resistance at all. All that was left behind was the sense of an eerie, otherworldly chill. Damn it. Spinning around, Sunny frenetically tried to come up with a countermeasure. But there was no need. The mist did not harm Saint. Instead, it was being absorbed into her body, disappearing with a trace. It would have looked concerning if it did not look so familiar. Huh? Sunny had seen something similar once before. Rather, he had not seen it, blinded by true darkness, but he had sensed it. It had happened in the great hollows of Godgrave, during the Battle of Vanishing Lake. Back then, Saint shattered one of Mordred's reflections, which had been mirroring Revel. Saint had absorbed the mirrored darkness then. But she also absorbed the wisps of eerie, chilling mist that had appeared after the reflection was destroyed. Now that Sunny knew how others had been created, he could confirm his suspicions that they contained nothingness within them. When the reflection was destroyed, that nothingness was released, and Saint took it for herself, which granted her an ability to manipulate her weight, reducing it at will. And now, she was absorbing more nothingness. How does it even work? Nothing of the sort had happened when Sunny killed the 3 thugs near the hospital last night. So, this process had to be unique to Saint, because she already had a minor affinity to nothing, and wanted more. The long tendrils of white mist flowed faster and faster, being absorbed into Saint's body. The mist was ethereal and ghostly, but nevertheless, a powerful wind rose as a white vortex surrounded Saint. Her raven-black hair fluttered like a stream of pure darkness, and her eyes seemed to blaze with a cold crimson light for a moment. The torrent of rain seemed to freeze, numerous droplets of water suspended in the air. Then, it all ended abruptly. The wind died down, and the rain resumed, splashing heavily against the asphalt. The 6 corpses were nowhere to be seen. Saint flinched, then rubbed her eyes in confusion. Oh. She blinked a few times. Sorry. I seem to have gotten dazed for a few moments. She smiled tentatively, then offered the revolver to Sunny. I think it will be better if you take this, detective. Sunny looked at the archaic gun, which Saint was gripping a little bit too tightly. The solid metal was bending like wax in her grip, and by now, the entire thing looked like a shapeless lump of metal. Naturally, that was not a strength that a mundane person could possess. To bend metal like clay, one had to possess the power of at least an awakened. Sunny looked at Saint with a stunned expression. I'll be damned, indeed. It seemed that she had somehow regained at least a part of her power. Sunny stared at the lump of metal in Saint's hand. Saint stared at it, too. Effie stared at Sunny and Saint with a funny expression. Wow. She came closer and inspected the former revolver, then said thoughtfully. Is this the power of therapy? What in the world is she saying? Sunny finally managed to regain his composure. At that moment, he smelled something in the air. An acrid stench that assailed his nostrils despite the rain. Smoke. His eyes widened a little. Oh, no. Help me get him out. Behind them, the leaking fuel had finally ignited, and fire was swiftly spreading across the overturned PTV. Crap. Forgetting her jokes, Effie grabbed the deformed passenger door and tried to pry it open. Sadly, even her incredible strength was not enough to dislodge it. The door was bent completely out of shape and stuck, jammed by something from inside. It only took Sunny a split second to evaluate the situation. Finally taking what remained of the revolver from Saint's hand, he gestured to the PTV. Dr. Saint, can you give it a try? Still showing symptoms of being in shock, she nodded slowly, and then reached forward to grab the edges of the deformed door. The bent metal simply tore like paper under her fingers, and a moment later, she easily ripped the door of its hinges. Dropping it to the ground, Saint stared at her hands in dazed silence. Great job. Sadly, Sunny did not have time to comfort her at the moment. Diving into the interior of the battered PTV, which was slowly filling with fire and smoke, he swiftly cut the seat belt and grabbed the unconscious form of the other Mordred. A second later, Sunny had already dragged the CEO of the Valor Group out of the PTV. The fire just barely managed to lick his designer leather shoes. Falling into a puddle, Sunny let out a stifled groan and allowed the rain to cool down his face. Ah, damnation. He had been stabbed yesterday. Today, he was hit by a PTV. What the hell was going to happen tomorrow? Before Sunny could relax, Effie grabbed him and hoisted him to his feet. What are you doing? Sunny stared at her in confusion. Exasperated, Effie pointed at the burning PTV, which was already spouting billowing pillars of black smoke. Flammable fuel, remember? It's going to explode. Sunny stared at her with confusion for a moment, then shuddered and jumped to his feet. He grabbed Saint and dragged her away while Effie hoisted the other Mordred on her shoulder like a sack of scent paste and followed. They dashed forward, suffering from the pain in their bruised and injured bodies, only stopping when they were a safe distance away. Sunny fell to the ground again, and this time Effie followed, panting heavily after she placed Mordred down. They looked back at the burning car, preparing to duck down when it blew up. However, a few seconds passed, and then a few more. And then, even more still. Effie scrunched his face. Why isn't it exploding? Sunny gave her a long look, then palmed his face and let out a long sigh. Why would it explode? Flammable and explosive are two entirely different things. There's not even much pressure in the fuel tank. Effie blinked a few times. But they always explode in the movies. Sunny groaned. Do you believe everything you see in the movies? There are movies about you, damn it. And those are completely fabricated. Effie remained silent for a while, then coughed sheepishly. Oh. Right. Makes sense. Sunny wanted to say more, but at that moment, a new PTV appeared out of the rain, sliding on the wet asphalt and stopping just in front of them. He would have prepared for another fight if not for the fact that this PTV was quite familiar. It was Effie's family car, which they had entrusted to Morgan. Sunny had suspected that getting the other Mordred out would not be easy. So, Morgan had been left behind to make sure that his security detail did not catch up to them, then follow them from a distance. Her secondary goal had been to check if anyone else was following the CEO of the Valor Group. As a result, she called Effie and informed her about the pursuing vehicles. Granted, the plan did not go as intended, in the end. Sunny had hoped to meet up with Morgan further down the road and change vehicles before retreating back to the abandoned church, so that nobody could track them. Sadly, the pursuers ended up acting far more aggressively than he had anticipated, resulting in a car crash and a bloody fight. In hindsight, it was for the best. If everything had gone without a hitch, Saint would not have absorbed the white mist and regained some of her power. The door of Effie's PTV opened, and Morgan walked out into the rain, still wearing oversized clothes. It was a bit funny, to see the elegant princess of valor in such a peculiar outfit, but Sunny wisely held his comments back, knowing that he could lose at least a finger or two if he said anything. Morgan stopped for a moment to take in the sight of the carnage. An overturned PTV was enveloped in flames, with a pillar of black smoke rising into the sky. Another vehicle was standing tilted to one side, its entire forward portion crushed. The road was covered in blood, with two motionless bodies soaking in the rain. Sunny and Effie were both battered and sitting on the ground. Saint was standing above them with a lost expression, while the other Mordred was unconscious, his stylish suit charred and dirty. Morgan stared at him for a long while, then sneered and looked away. "Having fun without me? What, were these two highly skilled, elite assassins too?" Sunny shook his head. "They were trained, for sure, but actually, there had been 8 of them." Effie nodded somberly. "Until Miss Saint shot 6 of them dead, and then, ate them." Saint flinched and looked at her with wide eyes. Morgan frowned. "Let's leave the explanations for later. For now, get in the car." Sunny hesitated for a few moments, then shook his head again. "This altercation was far too public. We'll need to give some sort of explanation, unless we want to become official fugitives." He sighed. "And we can't become fugitives, because that would give the entire city a legitimate reason to hunt us down, an opportunity that the Castellan won't ever miss. So, take Saint and the other Mordred and go. Effie and I will stay and deal with the repercussions." Morgan gave him a cold glance, lingered for a while, and then nodded. "All right. You two look like you need to visit a hospital, anyway. I promise I won't kill this person before we meet again." With that, she pulled her leather gloves up, bent down, and grabbed the other Mordred. "Dr. Saint, please get into the car." Saint looked at her for a few moments, then quietly climbed into Effie's PTV. Soon enough, the PTV drove off, leaving Sunny and Effie alone at the scene of the crime. She sighed. "You know what? I never thought I'd be a cop one day." "What about you?" Sunny considered her question for a bit. "Actually, I had been a cop for a day, once." She looked at him with a stunned expression. "Really? What did you do?" Sunny shrugged tiredly. "Tracked an unhinged awakened and helped the government put him down. You know how it is." Effie stared at him for a while, then threw her head back and laughed. "Oh, and when you did you think that you'll be the unhinged awakened, one day?" Sunny smiled tiredly. To be honest, he had been a little bit unhinged back then, already. "You absolute cretins. Goddamn ingrates. Complete and utter morons. Atrocious, abominable addlepates." The homicide division captain's face was so red that Sunny was starting to get seriously concerned about the old man's health. He was positively apoplectic, shouting at the top of his lungs, howling, almost. Spit was flying every which way, and his entire desk was shaking, as if scared of the old man's rage. Sunny and Effie were standing on the carpet in front of the desk, looking down like naughty children. "But, Captain. Shut the hell up. Shut your damn mouth, you damn miscreant." The captain slammed his fist into the table with so much force that the screen of his primitive computer jumped, and his coffee mug flew off the wooden surface. Unsatisfied, he hit the desk a few more times, making it seem like the desktop would crack. Sunny looked at the captain with concern, making the man go pale with fury. "You reprobate dimwits. Foul degenerates. Horrid, heinous, obscene lowlifes. You absolute buffoons. Do you have no brains whatsoever between the two of you, huh? Answer me, you fetid scumbags." Sunny glanced at Effie, hesitated for a moment, and then said carefully. "Well." The captain growled, looking ready to flip his desk over. "I said shut the hell up." He huffed and puffed, glaring at them with pure, unadulterated loathing. Sunny sighed. "You see, we thought." The captain threw a paperweight at him. The paperweight missed Sunny by about a meter and shattered the frame of a fancy certificate of recognition behind him. "Oh, you can think now? There are thoughts in your dull, defective heads now?" You lousy, pestilent dumbass. Depraved, deplorable, detestable simpletons. You sordid varlets. Go die in a ditch, bastards. Sunny winced. That's taking it too far. After all, they looked half dead, already. Both Sunny and Effie were covered in bandages, with bruises and plaster everywhere. He even had one of his arms resting in a sling. Effie decided to make her presence known at that moment. Captain, please calm down. Sadly, her words had the opposite effect. Instead of calming down, the captain drew a hoarse breath and shook, resembling a boiling kettle. Sunny almost expected to see steam coming out of his ears. Calm down? Calm down? You calm down. Calm the hell down, you filthy, abhorrent, ghastly malcontents. Lame-brain halfwits. Delinquent hoodlums. Depraved, contemptible assholes. You repugnant wretches. Now he wasn't even making any sense. Luckily, the captain seemed to have run out of steam, or out of expletives, perhaps. He fell heavily back on his chair, eased up his tie, and unbuttoned the top button of his white shirt. After catching his breath, the captain gritted his teeth and looked at them with scathing malice. You. He raised a shaky hand and picked up a binder from his desk. Let me go over your incredible feats, bastards. Where should I start? The old man shook the binder in the air. Damaged road surface, destroyed barriers of a freeway exit ramp, a lane divider completely obliterated. That's just city property, you ghouls. There's private property, as well. Do you like driving on pavements? The captain took a ragged breath. Do you know how much all of this costs? You pair of cowboys can work for the rest of your goddamn lives, and your combined paychecks won't be enough to cover the cost. Your damn grandchildren will still be paying for all the mayhem you caused long after you two are buried in cheap, budget caskets. He covered his face with a palm. Now, where did I stop? Oh, damages, forget about the damages. Damages are the least of your troubles. Multiple injuries among civilian drivers, all lawsuits waiting to happen. One criminal is in a morgue, one is in the ICU with multiple rib fractures and a collapsed lung, still unconscious. Someone will have to pay his hospital bill, as well. By mirage, couldn't you have killed him too, at least? Sunny and Effie looked at each other again. Sunny coughed. Well, if you want, that can still be. The captain frenetically searched for his paperweight, then remembered that he had already tossed it at Sunny, and threw a decorative statuette at him. Instead. This time, the statuette shattered the frame of a photo portrait. Die. Go die, you lunatic. The old man shook, then groaned. Actually, forget about the damages, the lawsuits, and the hospital bills. Mordred of the Valor Group. Why did you have to grab him, of all people? Without a warrant. Sunny cleared his throat. You see, Captain. We were reasonably sure that his life was in danger. So, we took him into protective custody, sort of, and what would you know? We were right. Effie nodded energetically. Right. Those guys were trying to kill him, and we saved his life. So, we are basically heroes. Yeah. The captain just stared at her with resignation, letting out a groan. He leaned back and whispered in a tired voice. I'm too old for this crap. I'm too old. He remained silent for a long while, and then barked so loudly that the glass in the windows trembled. Then how did he disappear? How the hell did he vanish from you goddamn protective custody? Sunny took a deep breath. Well, sir, you see, his sister appeared and drove off with him. We haven't seen him since. The captain banged his head against the desk. His sister? The same sister who escaped from a mental asylum yesterday? Sunny nodded, then offered in a helpful tone. Yes, sir. Her name is Morgan. I know what her damn name is. I knew. The captain straightened slowly and looked at them with a distant expression. Then, he sighed and shook his head. In any case, both of you are suspended effective immediately. Until further notice, or indefinitely. Sunny and Effie both raised their heads at the sound of that. Captain. Sir. The captain barked. Don't sir me. You don't even understand how royally you screwed up, do you? And not just that, you screwed me over in the process. He gritted your teeth. You are lucky to be suspended, idiots. Be thankful that I'm not putting you behind bars. I would love nothing more. But that will only add to the mountain of crap I need to shovel. So, surrender your badges and get the hell out of my sight. Now. Sunny and Effie looked at each other. Honestly, they did not particularly care about having these badges. But out of respect for the elderly captain, they both acted appropriately crushed. Effie hung her shoulders, walked up to the desk, and silently placed her badge on it. Sunny took out his own and did the same. After placing the badge on the desk and before letting go of it, though, he looked at the captain and said, You can take our badges, Captain, but you can't take our resolve. That nonsense sounded like something the devil detective would have said. So, he said it. The captain looked at him tiredly. Then, he sighed. I'm going to kill you. Opening a drawer, he took out a holstered gun and began to pull the clasp open. I'm going to kill you right now. Sunny hurriedly let go of his badge and stepped away. Goodbye, Captain. Keep up the good work. A moment later, both he and Effie were gone, having retreated from the captain's office with startling haste. The old man looked down at the 2 badges laying on his desk. He sighed heavily. Too old, I'm too old. I'm too old for this crap. It was a bit funny, the badge was such a small thing, but Sunny felt almost naked without it. Suspended and tossed out of the police force, he and Effie found themselves standing in front of the Mirage PD headquarters, staring at the falling rain with somber expressions. It had taken a lot of time for them to be treated, interrogated, and then berated by the captain, so the sun was already setting. Both were in a subdued mood. Eventually, Sunny sighed. Feels strange. I've never been fired before, you know? Effie scratched the back of his head. Me neither. Sunny contemplated something for a moment. Actually, I've never really been employed before either. Effie tilted her head a little. Me neither. Wait, does working for the government count? He considered her question seriously, then shook his head. No. You joined the government as a saint, that's like being a boss, not an employee. Effie nodded with a chuckle. I guess so. But, hey. Technically, you were employed by Nephi's during the Domain War, as a mercenary. She paid you, so, that was a job. Sunny frowned. No, it wasn't. Also, technically, Nephi's had not paid him yet. He had asked her to owe him a favor as payment in return for his services, and never mentioned it again. Before he could explain that, however, Effie gave him a mischievous look. Just because you slept with the boss doesn't mean that you weren't employed, right? Sunny punched her in the shoulder and grimaced when that made his battered body flare with pain. Right. But she did not employ me. I tricked her into thinking that she employed me, but really, it has always been my goal to participate in the war on her side. I joined voluntarily. Effie blinked a few times. Huh. Wait, really? Sunny looked at her in surprise. Yes. Wait, you didn't know? Why did you think I planted the nameless temple in the middle of Godgrave? Because living in a death zone is fun? Effie stared back at him, baffled. I just assumed that you are a reclusive misanthrope. So yeah. Sunny laughed. I'm not. No, I am, but that was not why I rooted my citadel in Godgrave. I just predicted where the war would take place, established a presence there, and let the rumors about me spread, knowing that the great clans would take the bait and come find me eventually. Effie shook her head in bewilderment. Wow. How devious. Were you planning to make a move on Nephi's from the very start, too? Sunny smiled and looked into the distance. No. quite the opposite. My plan was to never take my mask off in front of anyone, let alone her. Needless to say, that plan failed spectacularly. Thank the gods. Effie chuckled. Ah. She looked at him with earnestness and said in a touched tone. Anyway, I am starving to death. Diner? Sunny did not answer for a few moments, remembering the delicious food served in the unassuming diner. Sure. I'm starving too. He remained motionless for a while, facing the rain, and then asked. Do you know what sucks, though? Effie raised an eyebrow. What? Sunny closed his eyes and grimaced. My PTV is a pile of charred scrap metal now. How are we even supposed to get anywhere? She blinked a few times. Oh. Oh. Effie lingered for a little while, then sighed. You're right. That does suck. Sunny and Effie could not rendezvous with the others immediately because they were being watched. Shaking off a tail was not simple without a vehicle. Either, which meant that they had to buy some time and keep a low profile for a while. So, having learned the strange rituals of hailing a taxi in Mirage City, they soon arrived at the familiar diner. The city outside was drowning. The rain, which had been oppressively persistent when they first arrived at Mirage City, was simply unnatural now. It poured and poured from the dark heavens, inescapable, never letting up. In fact, it seemed to only grow heavier as time passed. The rivers and canals were on the verge of overflowing, and the lakes were slowly devouring more and more of their shores. The flooding in the lowlands had already begun. Countless people were being evacuated, and even more were moving to temporary shelters on higher ground themselves. Because of that, the roads were terribly congested, with car horns blaring constantly as countless vehicles became hopelessly stuck. A few of these congested roads had been flooded, as well, so people had to abandon their PTVs and escape on foot. Somewhere far away, behind the dams, great reservoirs of water were swelling, too. But everything was fine in the vicinity of the decrepit diner. The floods had not reached this part of the city, and the locals were not in a hurry to move anywhere either. After all, their neighborhood sat atop a tall hill, so short of a catastrophic failure of the northern dam, nothing could really threaten them. The dining hall was just as empty as always, and the grumpy waitress disappeared into the staff area after delivering their food. Sunny and Effie dedicated themselves to the sin of gluttony for a while, briefly forgetting all their scrapes and aches. When they were done, Sunny leaned back in satisfaction and sighed. Sort of feels like our last meal, doesn't it? It was in more senses than one. Their adventure in Mirage City was swiftly moving toward a conclusion, not because they were ready to conquer the Palace of Imagination, but simply because the Castellan was steadily escalating its attacks. Whether Sunny and his companions were ready or not, there was not much time left for them. In a few days, maybe even as soon as tomorrow, the final confrontation between them and the Castellan was going to take place. No matter how it ended, Sunny and Effie were unlikely to return to this secluded diner and enjoy the food served here by an unfriendly waitress. They would either win and return to the real world, or die. Either way, this was indeed their last meal here. Effie looked at the empty plates with a somber expression, then sighed. Well, if that is the case, should we order another one of everything?